Cool. Hello, welcome to our conversation starters. This is Jewish Museum Milwaukee here with Brad Lichtenstein. Did I do that right? And he is an award-winning filmmaker who's been making documentaries since 1998. He is the founder and executive director of 371 Productions. And we'll talk a little bit more about his bio in a second. But just so you know, this is a series that we run every week on Wednesday around 1:30. They go live. Generally, they're not actually live, but today we're trying out some new functionality here at Jewish Museum Milwaukee, and we're actually going live. And at least 3 people are here watching us right now. So hello. So welcome to Conversation Starters, Brad.
Thank you.
I'm going to just drop a bunch of information about you, and then we're going to jump right in. So as I said, you are the founder of 371 Productions. You've won 2 DuPonts, one for your 2016 production as part of the Al Jazeera America series, Hard Earned, and another for your 2001 film, Ghosts of Attica. And you've also been nominated for a News and Doc Emmy for your film, As Goes Janesville, which certainly still has a lot of political resonance in 2020 as much as it did in 2012. That's when So Goes Janesville is from 2012, right?
Something like that.
I'm like, it's that political cycle. And he was nominated for a Peabody for his radio series about gun violence, Precious Lives, which was a phenomenal local series that really, I think, touched so many people in this market and really gave voice to so many people in Milwaukee about what was happening with gun violence in their lives here. So thank you so much for joining us. And
pleasure.
Let's jump into our kind of talk today. So you have been working with the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, and I just want to get a sense, how did this project start and what is the process and what are you working on?
Sure. So the project is about a group called the Oyneg Shabbes, which was a secret group within the Warsaw Ghetto during the Holocaust, obviously, that was attempting to document what was going on, mostly inside the ghetto, but not exclusively so. And they operated as kind of a quasi-journalistic enterprise, but they went further than just writing. They wrote journals, they wrote articles that were circulated detailing what the Nazis were doing and what life was like. But they also tried to collect stories and artifacts, poems, all kinds of sort of evidence of Jewish life and also evidence of Nazi atrocities. And eventually they realized that their mission in the beginning had to change. So in the beginning, they wanted to try to push this information out into the world in the hopes that countries like the United States would intervene. At a certain point, it became apparent that that wasn't going to happen and that the ghetto was going to be liquidated. And so they buried a lot of these artifacts in metal. They sort of look like library archive, like steel library archive boxes, if that makes any sense. And also,
I always think of them as milk cans. Is that?
Well, I was just about to say, milk cans. So it was a mixture of the two. And then, as most people know, the ghetto was razed. And so all of that was lost to humanity until they were eventually discovered when the ghetto was excavated. And so the Holocaust Museum has one of these milk cans in their collection. The Holocaust Museum in Warsaw has the other 2 that exist. Mm-hmm. And the problem they asked us to solve with VR was, how do you get an audience, the visitors, engaged with an artifact, an object in the collection, which has all this story literally buried within it. But it's very hard to get visitors just because of the way the flow is inside the museum, and probably people have been there. They know, you're kind of moving through, and it's hard to really get someone to stop and read and learn. And plus, there's not that much to read and learn because also due to flow, you can't really expect there to be a lot of content there. So all this started, believe it or not, I think May will be 3 years ago.
Wow.
I know it's for good reason. It's a slow process. I can explain. So I was on a panel at the American Film Institute has a documentary section that has a festival in DC every year, and I was on a panel talking about, among other things, virtual reality. And one of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum staff was in the audience. Sylvina is her name. And afterwards, she just came up and said, we've been talking about VR, and would you be interested in having this conversation with us? And she warned me that they move very slow. And they move very slow for good reason, because the Holocaust Museum is very much the steward of the narrative and the history of the Holocaust. And as people might know, when they started in the early 90s, I want to say 1992 maybe, is when they opened their doors, somewhere around there. They were almost the only Holocaust museum in the world. Of course, there was Yad Vashem, but today there are, I'm going to forget the number. I want to say it's like 160, but it might be more Holocaust museums and memorials that have exhibits. And almost all of them have, in one way or another, looked to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum for guidance in their planning and execution of exhibits and so forth. Plus a lot of what they make in terms of exhibits tours these other venues. So, there's probably 9 different departments that we have engaged with as we have developed the virtual reality that we're doing with them. And we just finished in November a residency, which was like a phase 1 testing with the public there. You look a little frozen. Are we still good? Ellie? Okay, I'm going to assume that the public can still hear and that Ellie will unfreeze. Ellie, you still good?
I am. I'm trying to fix some technical difficulty. Is everything okay there?
Yep, everything's good.
Okay.
So in any case,
okay. So
we had a residency, and the residency was designed for us we made some VR, and I'll explain what that was. And then the public and the staff came through, and we did surveys to get feedback. And the feedback was both about sort of user experience, if this was an exhibit in the museum, would you as a visitor want to do it? And did you have any difficulty, that kind of stuff. And then also on the content side, staff weighed in on, kind of how good of a steward are we? There's always a fine line the Holocaust Museum wants to draw between sharing the stories, but never crossing over to sort of suggest that you yourself could know exactly what it was like.
Right.
And so
that's a challenge with VR, because you actually can put people more in a situation than, say, an exhibit display. That is a slippery slope right there.
Right. So we were very deliberate with our approach. So let me just quickly kind of describe what we made, and then maybe we can go to that image, and then I can talk a little bit more about it. So we settled on, and this was like testing to see what would work. We settled on 3 different kind of sections, if you will, of VR in the testing phase. So the first part, you put the headset on, and you are in a space, 3-dimensional. You can walk around and everything. That is very similar to an imagined kind of exhibit space at the museum with the milk can in front of you. And you can walk up to it, you can kind of peer into it, and you can even reach into it. And there are documents in there, sort of the artifacts that were collected by Oyneg Shabbes. And then there's kind of a transition that happens. So like if you try to get all the way in, it sort of transitions into the next scene. And the next scene, what we wanted to do is kind of test interactivity. So it's highly interactive and it's non-narrative, meaning there's no real story, that it's kind of up to you. And you are in Emanuel Ringelblum's study. So Emanuel Ringelblum and Rachel Auerbach were the co-leaders of Oyneg Shabbes. And in his study is where a lot of business was conducted for the group. So you're in the study, and all around you on the desks and credenza and old-timey radio, and even on the walls are things like poems, Nazi artifacts like doctrine posters, journals that you can open. And each of those, when you interact with them, there's a voice that happens that reads what they are in English, because most of them are not in English. They're in Yiddish, they're in German, they're in Hebrew.
So are you showing the original document but having the voice translate it for you?
Well, it's the world is created as animation, but don't think cartoon animation. It's like very photoreal animation. And then the voice are voiceover actors that that I directed reading these snippets. And there's like a candle that you can kind of light your way. And then when you're done, when you've had your fill in that room, there's a door that kind of beckons you, and you can go in and turn the knob on the door and go into the last scene. And then the last scene was taken from Rachel Auerbach's journal the day after liquidation. So she survived. She was one of the few, if not the only, I think the only who survived of the sort of main leadership group. And she is walking through an alley the day after liquidation, and there's a light snow falling. If you've seen the movie Who Will Write Our History, this scene is very provocative in the movie, and we wanted to recreate a version of that for the VR. And all around you is sort of the detritus of Jewish life that no longer exists because everybody's gone, but their belongings, furniture, bedding, all kinds of stuff has just been thrown out of the windows of the surrounding buildings and crashed onto the ground. And she's kind of navigating that path, and you can hear soldiers and you can hear trains, off in the distance. Behind you is the wall of the ghetto. So beyond that is, freedom. And as she navigates through this, you hear this poem. And the reveal in the poem is that it's not snow, it's actually feathers from all of the bedding. And so we did that because now what we were testing was like different approaches. So the first part was like, this is the exhibit, and the exhibit comes to life. What do people think about that? The second part is highly interactive without narrative. What do people think about that? And the last one is all narrative. I mean, you can choose where to walk, and the music and sort of the rhythm of the scene makes you walk kind of slow, which is our intention. But what you're hearing is the track. And then we very deliberately did it so you're hearing her voice, with the implication is you're not her. So we're not suggesting that you can know what it was like to be her. You're sort of a witness to her experience. In the Ringelblum archive, it's like you've arrived after they've left. So again, it's like you're a witness, but you're not actually in it. And that's kind of the line that we drew. So I'm just going to share my screen to show this one image. Because I think it helps people see.
Once you share your screen, I'll pop it up and populate it.
I should be sharing screen. No? Let me try. Oh, there we go. Okay. See if you can see. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So that is actually, oops, I didn't mean to do that.
And we actually showed this film with Rivka's Diary, the exhibit we have right now, because, we felt like understanding other ghetto experiences, and especially this experience of how people were preserving their stories in the Warsaw Ghetto, was such an interesting parallel to the story of a girl writing in a diary in the Lodz Ghetto. This is a totally striking image and the sort of thing that sticks with you.
And so the director of this film, Roberta Grossman, is actually working with us.
Oh, nice.
Not formally, just kind of informally. We've been talking to her a lot. She did a lot of the archival research already, so she shared that with us. But this is kind of the environment that you're in during the last scene.
So when this is unveiled at U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, you will have the opportunity to go through all three of these pieces. Like each of these rooms is now.
So we're developing. So that was phase one, or I guess phase two. Maybe all the meetings were phase one. The next step is that we are going to work on the last scene. You're back on me, right? The share screen is done. Oh, you can undo that. I got rid of it.
I'm back on you. Yeah.
Okay. So what we decided to do now is we got a lot of notes back. I'm working with a woman named Erin at the museum. She gave me a lot of notes. I'm redoing the script based on her notes and some of the other people in exhibitions there. And then we're going to redo that scene in kind of a more, I don't know, polished and finished kind of way. And then we're going to do a series of tests with that scene and the public. I mean, obviously COVID-19 is changing the schedule for that, but whenever they're open again, we'll start to figure out where that fits. And then the idea is that based on that, we will then kind of have notes to design the whole experience. And my feeling is where that's heading next will be a temporary exhibit at the museum, and also some of the satellite organizations, some of the satellite museums. And that will be a step towards understanding what, if anything, will become part of a permanent exhibit.
It's, as I always like to say, when we put up an exhibit, it's always this like very deliberate, lengthy process, but this is even more so. Yeah. That museums nothing comes down from on high and is like, hey, this is it's installed. That it takes a lot of steps and processes and interpretation evaluation before you get to that point.
And there's a lot to learn how visitors will, respond. I mean, there's a lot there. I've learned a lot by working with them, and they're amazing.
So how has your work life kind of shifted in this moment of being at home, not going out into the world, filming things? What is the same? What is different?
Obviously I'm at home. I'm in my wife's office, which she has kindly given to me, and she's working in the upstairs guest room. We're extraordinarily lucky at 371. We're about 7 to 11 people, depending on how you count. And luckily, we have a major project that is in editing, is in post-production. And so that is very easy to do remotely. We just moved our editing computers to people's houses. And so my colleagues, Emily Keister is directing with me, and we have an editor in Chicago named David Simpson, and we have assistant editors here in Milwaukee, Daniela Cortez and Chelsea Merrow and Bianca Fuster. We're all working remotely. We're all using Slack to communicate. We have Zoom meetings. I have a big whiteboard right over here that I'm working out story cards and structure of the film. It's about the football team in Milwaukee and Shorewood. It's a combined team between Mesmer High School and Shorewood High School.
Oh.
And it's actually the only cooperative sports team in the country that takes two really different schools. I mean, they're different racially. Mesmer is all Black and Shorewood is predominantly white. They're different in terms of public, private, religious, non-sectarian. And we followed a football season. So we're doing that project with Participant Media, which, they do amazing work.
And really wide, release work too.
Yeah. I mean, this will be coming to a theater near you when we go to theaters again. That work just kind of continues. I mean, it took us like a week to sort of adjust to new workflow. And then we're in development on a film about social determinants of health with the lens being on epilepsy. And so we have a team, Miela Fetal and Marissa Williams are primarily leading that. And, they're each at their homes, and they're Zoom calling all day long with people that we're in the research and development stage. So, people who are scientists and sociologists and doctors and clinicians. And then now they've been talking to potential patients. We're focusing on stories in Alabama. And so, the question will be, we're supposed to be done with our research and development towards the end of May. And the question will then be, can we go start filming in June? Don't know.
Yeah, well, and I would wonder there also, depending on patients and access, does it really limit the pool of people that you're able to research with based on if they have internet, if they have, or does that shift to your?
Well, we sort of recognized early on that the digital divide will impact who we're able to reach. And since we're focused on social determinants of health, we obviously don't want to only reach the people who have means to be able to have connectivity. So far, we've been pretty lucky. Advocates in the epilepsy world have helped us connect with potential characters that we would follow, in different circumstances. But we do need to get a little deeper, a little bit more rural, where there's less connectivity. So we've been talking about, what would it look like if we were able to bring or have someone on our behalf bring an iPad and a hotspot to locations that are more rural. So we'll see how that.
Probably not something you were anticipating having to troubleshoot.
No.
You're like, no, I'll just send a crew down to rural Alabama. It'll be fine.
Right. That would be the normal thing. Is our team would go down and pre-interview people. So. But I think in the scale of things that people are facing, we're so lucky. I mean, we have a lot of friends, freelancers that we work with, particularly people who are, camera people in our industry for documentary. And then, more broadly, like in the scripted world, where my partner, Suzanne Jerva, leads up most of our development in scripted. And, Hollywood is shut down and agencies have fired people. And, it's really bleak. We're working with a woman who's an executive on one of our projects, who is part of a sort of an executive group that's trying to figure out how to reopen Hollywood in terms of insurance protocols. And I know this is probably boring stuff, but anyway,
I'm interested.
Good. It's very complicated because a movie has to have insurance, and most movies at high budget levels have a bond to secure it. And so those are all high risk endeavors. I mean, well, they're risky endeavors, which insurers and bond companies want to have reduced risk on. And so there needs to be a protocol that makes them feel comfortable to start doing business again. So it's, and then we're also in the middle of pitching a COVID-19 vaccine film based on following someone that we've been able to connect with who's very involved in the vaccine race. But, I have no idea. I mean, that project could be dead tomorrow. Just depends on whether or not buyers are interested.
Do you think there's going to be a kind of, in a year and a half, based on, or 2 years, wherever that production schedule is, that there's going to be a huge renaissance of documentary film and animation, because those are the films that can be made in this period, as opposed to live action kinds of scenarios? Just because what movies can be made right now and in the next, with less than 10 people gathered in a room?
Right. I don't know.
I'm interested. I'm what's the timeline there?
Yeah, I mean, 10 people in a room would be fine for documentary, because we're usually 2 or 3 people. It's more all that scripted world. I mean, I know that studios are trying to move anything that they had in post-production through to get out as content. As you probably know, Netflix is about to announce the best quarter they've ever had.
I'm sure.
However, don't go investing, because they're still heavily leveraged with debt. I just don't know. I hadn't even thought about the animation.
Because animation, you can do it in a vacuum as well. Not a vacuum, but you
can do it without going out of the house. No, totally. I mean, our Arthur Ashe VR film had tons of animation in it, and the 2 women who made that worked out of their garage for 9 months. So, certainly feasible. VR is feasible.
Right.
Animation. So that's why we're still able to work on the Holocaust project. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. We've been more focused on what happens to premieres for films. So, like, for instance, the Messwood football film, we'd always figured, we would cross our fingers, but we would hope to get into Sundance, which is January. All the major festivals leading up to Sundance have been canceled. So or some are going online, but it's not quite the same in terms of having a premiere and having buyers there and all that stuff. So, we're wondering, someone described it as, that meal that moves through the boa constrictor. There's this huge glut of projects that haven't found a premiere. And how many of them are going to go straight to streaming or PBS or whatever, we don't know. So what's Sundance going to do? Are they going to maybe expand to allow more premieres, or what, does it just push the whole schedule further? Maybe premieres aren't as important in the release strategy. I don't know. Like, all that stuff is very up in the air.
So literally a brave new world in like how movies will be not just produced, but how they are actually packaged and put out into the universe,
for a while.
Between
streaming. For a while. Yeah, for sure.
What do you think is most likely to stick in all of this, kind of, that you're like, as you've been, I don't know about you, as we've been doing a lot of our work remotely, here are the places where I'm like, this is something that we should have been doing anyway. Are there points of that in your work that you're like, this is something we should have been doing anyway?
Well, it came up in our team call is on Tuesdays, and I asked the group that question. I think one thing that's going to stick is, I think we will institute much more flexible work hours and locations. One thing that came out is, people had strong reasons why they did want to be in the office and they missed it, but also some strong reasons why they felt like they could get certain kinds of work done better at home. Like, for instance, Emily is a writer on a project with Santana, and she reported that she's able to concentrate on the writing much better when she's at home. So, then it gets into like wonky things around timesheets and all that kind of stuff. But, basically we're looking at how we can just be more flexible that way. I think that'll stick. The editing thing, as long as I've lived in Milwaukee, which now is, I think, 17 years, except for short projects, I've never really worked with an editor on a long form film here. It's such a specialized talent. Most of those people are in New York or LA or, a couple of other places, Chicago. So, we've worked with editors remotely for a long, long time. So that workflow was not hard to get used to.
Right. You were totally prepared for that piece.
Like, like not even an issue. Like,
right.
On the documentary groups that I'm on, or Zoom calls and stuff, people are talking about getting used to that. And, I haven't sat in the edit room every single day on an edit since my boss made me at Lumiere Productions way back in 2002 before I moved here. And I didn't really like it then. So I'm glad we haven't done it. I feel like all I do is distract an editor, we end up talking about every cut. To me, it bogs down the process.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for kind of opening up this process. Thank you so much for sharing about this work with the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. And I think we're all really excited to see what that looks like and to get to go in. I know one of the things I always feel at a museum is that I want to touch the things. And the best thing that VR gives us, for me, is like that tactile learner, is the ability to actually interact physically with objects. And so I'm super excited to see where that goes.
Very cool. Well, that's good to know. And then, maybe we can figure out how to get that VR to the Jewish Museum in Milwaukee.
That would be wonderful. So thanks so much. This has been a conversation starter. That is by Brad Lichtenstein. I'm Ellie Gettinger. And tune in next week when we'll be talking to Amit Zahavi about Yom HaAtzmaut virtually and what that means all over the world and in Israel. And if you love this program, if you love JMM, consider making a donation. We're all in this together. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.